we bought him a shirt. But otherwise, Russ, you're a pretty nice guy, I guess.
I was just waiting for you to notice that we went live. I was trying to play an open bar.
No, I noticed. Believe me.
Try to catch him in the act.
Yeah. I now pretty much start out every episode just talking about Russ and how either great Russ is or something to just throw him off just because it's fun. I don't know if he actually listens to these at all though. But hey, Russ, this is pretty much how we start every episode now. We're talking about how you edit just for the love of podcast, which is pretty great. And please don't stop doing that.
Psycho, but we're happy that you're a psycho about that.
You're our psycho.
Yeah.
Also, Russ, come up with a new DGN soon and invite George on. I don't know why.
Yeah, there we go. I was on one a couple months back. So
you must have been pretty terrible. That's probably why we didn't have you back.
Oh, I was awful. I was kidding.
We've had people get zero, Bobby.
No, I was like the one who was like, I can name 15 of 17.
I got one. I got an imaginary point, and two, on the open bar this week, for whatever reason, J Mike decided to do basically like a mini DGN, and I swept it. I won 3-0 against 5 other people. It wasn't an official DGN pod, but I felt good about myself.
I'd take it. Just run with it.
Yeah, you have to take the victories where you can.
Oh, yes, you do.
But all right, I will count down and we'll get started here. I'm sure you guys want to get to dinner, or at least George, I'm sure you want to get to dinner. Matt wants to get to, or dessert. Matt wants to get back to his VR games. So. Let's do 3, 2, 1, and then I'll start talking. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of Zooperflex. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Matt. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Bobby. Excited to talk to an old friend I have not seen in a while today.
Yeah, and we're just going to jump right into it instead of our usual beating around the bush at the beginning of the episode. So our guest today is George Kritikos. He is a current 4for4 writer, former DLF, former PFF, and he also used to host the DLF podcast and edit, I just learned. So welcome to the pod, George, and we're glad to have you. And don't worry, we won't make you edit, as we specified before the pod that our job is already spoken for by Rush Fisher.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he's being compensated quite well, and I don't want to take that away from him. So I'm certainly happy to stay as a single act. Guest is good enough for me.
Yeah, and we really appreciate you being on. This is actually my first time podcasting with you, even though I've talked to you for what feels like a few years now. So always enjoyable to get to podcast with someone for the first time. And even though we're going to be talking about some not so enjoyable topics, at least for me tonight, and by that I mean specifically, and I'm just going to lead right into it, Drew Lock. If you follow me at all on Twitter or listen to me on podcasts, I think I've become like the president of the anti-Drew Lock fan club. I don't really know how exactly it happened. I just talked about it a lot. But that's one of the quarterbacks we're going to talk about tonight. We're also going to talk about Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. A lot of polarizing guys. And why don't we just get right into it and start talking about Drew Lock? So you guys already know how I feel. Let's start off with George. And George, what's your take on Lock? And I do want to begin just by saying that last year, Stompy, I think it's FF Stompy Bear on Twitter now, he recently changed it, hyped up Lamar Jackson, and then Lamar Jackson broke out. So now everyone thinks he's the quarterback whisperer, and he is hyping up Drew Lock. But I'm just putting this out there, and Stompy can feel free to come at me later. Stompy is a Broncos fan, so I feel like there is some bias going into this Drew Lock call. But I've said enough. George, give us your take on Drew Lock.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, those like second-year breakouts for quarterbacks is becoming more and more common with, Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And, then we guessed for some other ones that we got maybe a little bit more wrong, like Mitch Trubisky. We thought maybe it would be a second-year breakout as they, kind of retooled the offense. And it seemed like he was set up for success. And I feel like that's where Drew Lock kind of falls for me a little bit, is like I really like the surrounding weapons. I really think that they're investing into the offense. but I don't feel like they're investing into him per se. Like that sounds a little weird, but I just don't think that's where they're necessarily investing. I think they want to make it so that the quarterback position's maybe a little more fungible for them, just in case he doesn't work out, that they can bring someone else in and potentially they could walk into the success that he is supposed to have. So I'm a little bit skeptical. I think I have him as my QB 19 right now in Dynasty. And that feels about right. I mean, you kind of get into that muddy area and you guys know, where you start getting into like the veterans that you're not sure when they're going to retire, the young guys who haven't really had a starting shot, or in the case of some, just haven't had the weapons that Locke's about to have. So yeah, it's a tough one with him. I can't buy aggressively, but I also don't think his price is so expensive yet that you really have to pay up the way I think you did with Mahomes and Lamar Jackson before they really took off.
And Matt, do you agree, disagree? What's your take on Locke?
Yeah, and good job, Stompy, predicting Lamar Jackson. But I think pretty much everybody had that one. I mean, I just think that was such an easy one. Drew Lock, if you're right about that one, we'll start maybe give you the whisper handle. But yeah, I feel similarly with George. I actually have him exactly the same spot at quarterback 19 in the same tier with some vets and then some uncertainty with the vets with Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, and I still have Cam Newton up that high. That if he doesn't sign, that's probably going to be moving down. But then also in that same tier, another guy we're going to talk about tonight, in the rookie Justin Herbert. So I think the Broncos have given him every excuse to not fail, and if he still fails with this loaded offense that's around him, then I think he's going to sink even lower and probably fade into the background as the Broncos decide to look to the future. I don't know if he doesn't feel like a quarterback that has much more than a 1 year lease, kind of leash on him. Like if he fails this year, I think he's going to be in the conversation to be replaced. Maybe they give him another half a season, they bring in a rookie or somebody they draft highly to compete with him, and they give him like the starter and name in 2021. But it's just rough, but on the other hand, there is a lot of growth there, all the way down in the high teens. If he does succeed, a young guy, 23 years old, I believe, is, he's going to jump up into that top 10 to 12 discussion. Absolutely. So he's a very kind of volatile asset, I would say. And we're going to know pretty quick, in the first half of the 2020 season what we have in him. So it just depends on, if you think he's going to succeed with the weapons, or if you just think the talent is not good enough, whether you're buy or sell, because he is a good candidate either direction right now. Somebody that I think that there's going to be somebody in your league that's going to want to buy him. And if you're, on the fence, then you can get good value for him. I think he's a fine sell at this point too.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I jump in. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
George.
Yeah, I mean, you think about his 5 starts he had last year. He had 2 of the 5 were above 200 yards passing. I feel like that's a pretty low threshold, and he still couldn't reach it 3 of the 5 times. He only scored more than 13 fantasy points once in 5 starts, and that wasn't a bad offense last year. Good enough that he should have been, at least, potentially playable in some of those games. And he wasn't necessarily playing, just a killer load of defenses. He had to play Kansas City. He played the Raiders in week 17. They weren't exactly playing for anything, but it still was kind of a disappointment. And I know that, Fant's going to get a little better as tight ends tend to develop a little longer. He gets Melvin Gordon there, but that's kind of a double-edged sword. And obviously getting Jerry Jeudy helps too. And I guess KJ Hamler as well, if we want to talk about that. So I mean, the depth's there. And again, the talent's there. I just, there wasn't enough flashing for me, and he doesn't have the floor that a Lamar Jackson has as a runner to where I'm super excited. Like I'd be happy to grab him as a low end backup in either a dynasty league, or maybe even like that kind of like grab kind of 2 quarterbacks as your second option in like a Zooperflex league where you can, play the matchups a little bit more. But I just wouldn't feel excited knowing that like he was a locked in starter for me every week in any kind of league whatsoever.
Yeah, George just basically did my job for me. It's weird to hear reasonable takes on Drew Lock because I've been just rallying against so long. And I'm not even kidding you guys. I've heard people already saying, well, shouldn't he already be in the top 12? And it's like, where are you getting this from? I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of my Drew Lock anti-hype started before the draft, and I agree. They drafted a ton of players to surround him with weapons. So he's certainly in a position to succeed. But he was, by at least all statistical measures, terrible in his starts last year, at least for fantasy purposes. I have said before, I think he could be a game manager, which is fine for a real NFL quarterback. But for fantasy, it's just not what you're looking for. And it also just goes back to his college days. I'm just not a big believer in his talent. So I think that's why I'm a little bit lower than everybody else. But just to hear some people talking about him as if he already belongs in that upper echelon just really goes to show the fact that people really do buy this whole Stompy quarterback narrative. I mean, Stompy, good for you, man, because if you can take Drew Lock and make at least a good amount of the fantasy football community believe he belongs already there, you have a huge sway. And that's even after you've worn a singlet, not once, but twice. So I don't know what else to say except kudos to Stompy, and I'm still not a huge believer in Drew Lock.
I mean, the one thing I will say that is a relatively fair argument is after I'd say about the top 6 dynasty quarterbacks. If you think of some order of Mahomes, Jackson, Prescott, Watson, Murray, and Wilson, right? I think we can all agree they belong somewhere near the top, right? In whatever order you want to put them in. After that, I feel like you could make an argument for a lot of different guys to move around. That said, I don't feel like Drew Lock's in that argument, right? There's probably 10 names you could put, in that next like 5 or 6 spots. I still don't feel like Lock's one of them.
Yeah,
I would even say like 10 spots, like the next 10 to 15 spots.
Right.
I mean, I wrote an article for DLF, and this wasn't to make the case that one belongs over the other, but it was to make the case they should be closer together. And it's a guy that I've become known for talking about, one, because I looked like him in November, and 2, just because I seemed to be one of his only fans. But it was basically, people always say that Gardner Minshew was only mania and he wasn't actually that good. And Drew Lock is apparently a lock for being this quarterback 1 type in Dynasty. So I wrote an article about it. And for fantasy purposes, and basically from all statistical measures, Gardner Minshew was a much better starter in his rookie season than Drew Lock was. And yet, for whatever reason, they were like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 rounds apart in Superflex ADP. I don't know if that's since changed, but I will take Minshew every time over Lock because he's actually shown me a little bit more. And I think what George said earlier was true, that they both kind of have tenuous holds on their jobs right now. And so all things equal, I'll take the guy who's already shown it a little bit.
Well, and I'd argue he has more rushing upside than Lock has, so that much is helpful. I think he averaged like 10 or 15 more yards rushing per game than what Lock did last year. And granted, Lock's was abbreviated, but I think we can agree he's not fleet of foot. And, he was pretty consistently like a, 200 to 250 yards, like, a couple touchdown type guy, Minshew, that is. So, that where the ceiling is, but I think I would feel safer with his floor. And I think it'd be a fair argument to say in 2020, who's going to score more fantasy points. I think that's a push.
Yeah. The one thing that I've heard Lock truthers defend him with is he was coming off a wrist injury. And so there is some idea that the Broncos tried to ease him into game action, and that's why his numbers were so bad. I mean, I can understand coming off injury and maybe not playing as well, but I don't know. It's even before that. As I said, if you just watch some of his college game film, there's just not a lot there, at least for me. And I've tried to get other people to explain what they see. And a lot of it, I'm not trying to be that guy, but a lot of it does come back to he won games and he raps. Like when people talk about Minshew being mania, it's literally like, oh yeah, Drew Lock can rap and he won games in the NFL last year.
I think what it is everyone wants to write an article that says something like he's a lock for a QB1 finish, or, it's much easier to come up with like a really catchy fantasy football article title, other than maybe like Gardner Minshew or something. So I think there's just like a little bit of like, what's it called? Like search engine optimization with Drew Lock and like coming up with catchy fantasy football titles.
I do feel a little attacked right now, George, just because my article title was Drew Lock's lock status versus Gardner Minshew's mania. So there you go. Exactly what we were just talking about. Do you have final thoughts on Lock before we move on to our next guy?
No, it's quiet. It's quiet. That's it. It's quiet. Let me. Can I ask the final question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so So where do we see Locke finishing in terms of like his actual fantasy finish among quarterbacks this year?
I'll say like 16 to 20.
Okay.
Oh, I'm definitely going to be biased on this answer. I'm going to say like QB 24 at best.
Yeah, see, I was right around 20. So I'm like kind of splitting the difference between you two, but I feel like that's like right where I feel like he's going to end up. And like, yes, there's opportunity for it to go higher, but it's also like a ton of opportunity for him to throw like 20 interceptions and get benched halfway through the season.
And honestly, I'm hedging a little bit because I think it's either going to be, you know, closer to what Bobby said or even worse. Or if it's not that, then it's going to be, you know, like in the 12 to 15 range. I don't think he has much of a middle of the road outcome.
Yeah, I got told by someone that the Broncos, someone very prominent, I won't name them because they already came at me on Twitter for this, but that the Broncos will not definitively sign Cam Newton. I still think that the Broncos should sign Cam Newton because at the very least, he provides an option if Drew Lock is not what they think he is. I realize it might create a quarterback room controversy, but if Newton's willing to take a deal to go there, I see absolutely no reason that they shouldn't have him as an emergency option.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's like 10 teams right now that just, you know, he's probably just waiting on an injury at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're going to move on to our next guy. And our next guy is another one who you can find a lot of people who still believe and a lot of people who, after his last season, jumped off the bandwagon, and that's Baker Mayfield. And it's interesting. We're talking about a lot of quarterbacks right now who either can rap or can dance really well, if you've seen those videos of Baker. So I'm curious what you guys think about Baker before I get into my thoughts. And this time we'll start with Matt. So Matt, give some of your thoughts about Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I think he's probably valued pretty close to perfect right now. I currently have him as the quarterback 11 in terms of ADP. He is going off a quarterback 9. So I think that's fair. You know, we saw a number of analysts after the Odell Beckham trade last year move him up to quarterback 1, you know, anywhere from 1 to 5. So he was in that range. We made a similar goal or similar mistake, I think, with Carson Wentz after his, you know, near MVP season several years ago. So I think he's kind of in that, you know, that same kind of area, I think. So he's another one that I think is either going to drop or rise quite a bit. I'm confident. I think we put so much hype on that offense last offseason that there was no way they could really live up to that hype. So, you know, another year away. I know it's another new offensive system. I think it's a little bit more quarterback friendly system. You know, that they're presumably going to lean on the run. At least that's what we've known from Stefanski's history. You know, give Baker a little bit more easy opportunities for throws, and the weapons there are still incredible. You know, still have Jarvis Landry, still have Odell Beckham. You know, the 2 tight ends now, the 2 running backs. So I think he's in a good situation, just like Locke is. But I think their offense is a little bit ahead just because of the experience that they have, and Baker's, you know, experience too. And then comparing him to Locke, you know, he's got the draft capital of being number 1 overall. So I don't think we're gonna have to worry about him going anywhere in Dynasty. So I think right around that fringe top 10 is pretty much just spot on for him. And, you know, as a value play in a Zooperflex league, as your quarterback 1, if you're going to, you know, form a committee or something with those second 2 spots, with the second and third spot, I think Baker fits right into that kind of strategy as that back end top 10 guy.
George, what do you think?
That was beautifully said, Matt. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what he said. You know, I have him as my QB 9. I mentioned before, I think that there's kind of a big mess of quarterbacks, and you could argue him, you know, 5 spots lower. And honestly, I wouldn't have much objection to it because I think there are a lot of quarterbacks that, you know, have their questions, and Baker's included in that. And I think, you know, obviously the great rookie season helps him versus Locke doesn't have that pedigree of actually producing to this point. You know, to be fair, he didn't have much time to do it, but you know, so Baker, I think, has a little bit more of a leash for that reason too, in addition to the draft capital. And the second half of the season, he did look better. He was QB 11 in the last 8 games of the season. So, you know, there was some sign of a turnaround, even though the interceptions were still there, and that was problematic, but he was throwing more touchdowns. You know, he was consistently, you know, making much better plays than he did the first half of the year, especially before that bye week in week 7, I think it was, where, you know, he just looked horrendous like the first month and a half of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think that, focusing on the offensive line in the draft was a smart move. Getting, I think it was it Mekhi Becton, I think they ended up with, as their guy. I think that's going to help him huge. The offensive line was clearly an issue. I think having Kareem Hunt for a full season is going to help, and getting Austin Hooper there is going to help, and so all those things are good. It's just really going to come down to, is he going to kind of rein in those bad decisions he was making, and part of that due to that offensive line. Part of it, I think he was just pushing it, and when he wasn't having success early, it seemed like young person machismo kicked in, as we all had at age like 23, and really was just trying to power through everything. So yeah, I do like him, and I think I'm spot on with Matt as far as I think he's a good low end QB1 in a super flex league, and perfectly paired with like a couple of upside guys, and really just see what turns out from it. If you paired all three guys that we're going to talk about today on your super flex, rosters, your three quarterbacks, I mean, I'd be feeling pretty good going into the season, knowing that two of them are likely going to shake out and look pretty good.
And the other one's Drew Lock.
Yeah, right. and then you have a trade chip for Stompy in your league.
Yeah. In terms of Baker, so I'm with you guys. It just also kind of feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but every offseason we're like, all right, the Browns have made the perfect moves to finally be in position to be successful this year. And I do think that I believe in what the Browns have done this offseason, but there is that hesitancy of just believing it the past few seasons. I did actually buy Baker this offseason and is in an auction rookie league, but I sent $400, which is like the equivalent of about the 102. But just to give our listeners and you guys an idea, Kyler Murray went for about $600 last season in the rookie auction. So to get Baker for $200 cheaper than Kyler went as a rookie felt pretty good. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be maybe a back end QB1 or at least high upside QB2 type for this season and hopefully going forward. So I'm definitely with pretty much everything you guys said. And I certainly would still have him much higher than Drew Lock, for example. Although I was interested to see that Baker was something like QB 29 or QB 30 in fantasy points per game. It's not where he finished, but his PPG was not great at all last season. And that was kind of interesting to see because I thought he did at least slightly better than that.
Yeah, that first half kind of killed him more than anything. But I was going to ask a question. So you mentioned the rookie cash trade, and if you say it's like the 102, right? And let's assume this is a super flex league, that'd be the kind of like Burrow to kind of area. So, I mean, how are we comparing Mayfield to Burrow and Tua in terms of who we want on our roster?
I was actually going to ask the same question because I made a similar deal in Pigs 3 where I sent about 400-ish in cash, and that's a bankroll league, so the cash values are all over the place. But again, to give you an example, Burrow I think went in the like $600 range, $600-$700 range. So like at that kind of discount, I think I would rather have Baker. In my rankings, I do have both of the rookies just a couple of spots ahead of Baker. But if you're going to get that kind of cost difference between the two, I think I would happily take Baker if I can get him for, a half to 2/3 the cost of one of those two rookies.
Yeah, Matt summed it up perfectly, which is basically what I was going to say too. In that league, I had the second most rookie money. At one point I had the most, but I made a bunch of trades to get pieces I liked a lot. I had the second most, and I just didn't really, maybe I'm a chicken, but I didn't feel like getting in a quarterback fight. So I decided to make a trade for a quarterback instead of having to fight this other guy who had a lot of money for them. I still plan to bid him up just so that in case I can win them cheap. But it was one of those things where it was like, if they're going to go to $600, which I think they might, I'm happy to get Baker at $400 at what I consider to be a discount.
Right. Yeah. And it's a sure thing, right? Because to your point, you don't know what those prices will end up being versus, Baker's going to cost you that much money. But yeah, I have Tua and Burrow like right there with Baker all kind of clustered together, know, and then we can get into like roster construction, all that fun stuff. But, not today. We don't have that kind of time.
I will say I don't actually I do my own personal rankings. I don't do rankings for a site anymore, but I haven't updated them in a bit. But I probably would have them in the same tier. I think I've talked about this with Matt before. I'm a huge Tua fan. Back when the Giants didn't quite have their franchise quarterback yet, which I think they do now, I spent pretty much all my time watching college quarterbacks, trying to think like who's going to replace Eli. So I was watching Tua as a freshman, and I went, man, this guy is the guy that I want. And the fact that the Giants, don't get me wrong, I was happy that they got Daniel Jones, but the fact that they were actually in position to draft Tua and didn't draft Tua still broke my heart just a little bit, because it was so many years ago where it's just like, yes, all right, this guy, one day he will be on our team.
I mean, it's interesting to compare the three, because you think about the teams, like the NFL teams and the situations they're in, and it's all very different too. And that obviously comes into play when you think about your rankings with these quarterbacks, and like, who has like the better supporting cast, who has kind of the better, outlook, 2 or 3 years down the line with all the pieces they have around them. So it's kind of intriguing, because you start to move them around between, the 1 to 3 spots between the three of them, just based on different factors, because you can definitely argue any of them in any order.
Yeah, they're all on franchises that are kind of historically hard to trust too, which is interesting.
Right. Yeah, a lot of terrible ownership.
Which one of those three do you currently trust the most?
Miami.
Me too. I didn't expect to say Miami, but it's Miami for me too, just because of the new coaching staffs and everything. It seems like they have a plan at the very least.
Yeah, I would agree, and they still have a bunch of like draft capital for next year too. So like, if there's holes, they can keep trying to plug some things up, and I feel a little bit better about that than relying on AJ Green for too much longer in Cincinnati.
Yeah, the fact that
I like T. Higgins for the record, but just saying.
Yeah.
The fact, and we'll move on in a second, but the fact that Brian Flores managed to win any games with the roster that he had last season is insane. And the fact that he won multiple games just is even more insane. So I definitely, as Matt said, have a bit more confidence in the coaching in Miami than in the other places. But the Browns, as I said, I do also like what they did this offseason. It's weird. This is coming from a Giants fan, so I'm sure other people will be mad. But the Giants are also the butt of the NFL right now too. So take it with a grain of salt. But these teams have been, the butt of all the jokes for so long. It's interesting to hopefully see them coming on the up and up with some young, exciting quarterbacks. And with that, we're going to talk about another young, I'm going to say exciting with kind of like a question mark inflection quarterback, because we're talking about Sam Darnold, and he's still very young. I don't know if he still has some of the same shine on him that he did coming out, and I think some of that personally is due to Adam Gase, but I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. And this time we're going to start with George.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Gase, right? Like, we can make jokes about all day, and I have a decent amount of time, so we can do that for a bit. But I think with Darnold, he showed a ton, I thought, considering like the weapons he had last year and just everything going on around him, and his own injury and everything else. I mean, it was quite incredible to see him like be the QB8 in the second half of the season, and do that with a skeleton roster basically, and a shell of a Le'Veon Bell, and no tight end, and I mean no real tight end. So it was pretty impressive. I mean, I liked Sam Darnold, but he actually showed me a lot more than I was expecting him to last year, all things considered. And, they went out, they got a few pieces, and Herndon comes back, and Mims is there. And, even getting an insurance policy like P. Ryan helps. And was it Brashad Perryman's there as well. So I think they tried to fill some. I still think they're a decent ways away in terms of getting like a real talented offense. I wouldn't put them up there with any of the offenses we were just talking about with Tua and Burrow and Baker, but I think he can do pretty well with what he has there. I think I have him as the QB 15 right now. That feels about right. But yeah, you know what? I'm more excited about him than I thought I would be, just because I think he is quite talented. I don't really care for the coaching staff, but I think he can overcome the limitations around him.
Matt, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, George and I are cheating off each other or something, because I also have him as my quarterback 15, the same tier as Locke, but about 5 spots ahead of him, a tier below Baker and the 2 rookies. But Yeah, I'm kind of excited about him. He's got I was a big believer in Denzel Mims before he went there, and I think he's going to get maybe the best opportunity right out of the gate of all of the rookies, just because of what we're dealing with there at receiver. Jameis Crowder, I still like, but after him, I'm not really sure about. They want Brashad Berriman to be the guy. I'm not sure if he can't be the guy though. But yeah, it's all Gase though. But despite Gase's penchant for ruining everything around him, like George said, Darnold succeeded in the second half of the year. So, man, I wish we could flop Sam Darnold onto the Broncos and put Drew Lock on the Jets. And then I think if we had that situation, I bet we'd be talking about Sam Darnold up closer to that Baker Mayfield level, certainly in that top 10 of dynasty quarterbacks. So I think he's going to succeed despite the staff around him. And remember, we have to remember what I always have to keep telling myself with players like this is that the bad coaching is not going to last forever. That first round draft capital that they invested in and Sam Darnold is going to defeat the longevity of Adam Gase's career, and at some point we're going to see Darnold really take a step forward. Maybe it's not this year, but I think it is coming, and he's not someone I'm giving up on. I think right now really is kind of the best time to buy him, because I don't think his value is, even if he has another quote unquote bad season, let's see, he finishes in the late teens, early 20s, something like that, again a season that we're not excited about. I don't think his value is going to change that much, but if he does succeed, then I think his value is going to increase dramatically. So I think we're in a buying window right now for Darnold this offseason.
So here's a question I have. It's a personal team question, but I'm sure some of our listeners can get value out of it as well. In one league, I've been trying to sell Josh Allen, and I tried to trade him for Daniel Jones in a pick. That didn't really work. I tried to trade him for Jared Goff in a pick. I'm still waiting to hear back on that. Sam Darnold was one of those guys that I looked at and I was like, man, I'm probably going to be competitive this season. But I looked at him and I went, I don't know. This kind of feels like too big of a drop off that even if I get like a first round rookie pick next year back, that it's just too much. But at the same time, after listening to you guys, I'm kind of rethinking that. And now I want to hear your thoughts on that. Should I trade Josh Allen? By the way, it is a best ball starting lineup. So even though Allen may not always be the best quarterback, he does pretty well in that format. So should I trade him for Sam Darnold in a first?
Oof.
I don't think it's a bad move necessarily. I kind of, in some ways, I kind of think like Darnold's job is safer than Allen's. Like I think for fantasy, I think Allen obviously offers the rushing upside, but from an NFL perspective, I think he's probably a worse quarterback in terms of passing the ball. So they drafted Jake Fromm, may probably have some kind of insurance, like, okay, if this wild and crazy running quarterback with poor deep downfield accuracy doesn't work out, we have this safe guy behind him. So I can see a scenario where Darnold has a little bit more insulated value, but I do think you are giving up a decent amount of fantasy points in 2020. If you're not competing, I probably would do it. If I am competing, I probably wouldn't do it at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd echo most of what Matt said. And Allen's such a conundrum because to Matt's point, right? If you think about it just in terms of like, what do head coaches and offensive coordinators want? They don't want a guy who's, just as capable of, getting you up by 3 touchdowns as he is by putting you behind by 3 touchdowns, right? That volatility is not something that NFL coaches are excited about. And Buffalo is a good team, right? They obviously, I think they won 10 games last year. So that helps him out. I think that's going to help him keep his job longer, even if those fluctuations exist, because without that, he becomes like a Ryan Tannehill in Miami, where like he puts up pretty good numbers and, fantasy people seem to like him. Okay. But then, you make a few too many mistakes and you're winning only 3 or 4 games. Then it's like, okay, it might be time to hit the reset button. So I think Allen's probably safe. I would say at least for 2 seasons, especially now that the Patriots have kind of hit their own reset button. I think that has really helped him out. And to Matt's point, I think Darnold's safe as well. I think he's going to outlive that coaching staff in New York. And I certainly think that, if he puts up another, pretty good season, which I think he'll probably be like a fringe QB2, like, kind of in that like 20 to 24 range overall this year. I think that they're going to realize that they need to put a better option for him, like to thrive offensively, because I think they are going to realize like what they have in him and that they can't just squander too many of these seasons, especially during his rookie deal.
That makes a lot of sense. And I will say the guy I'm trying to trade Allen to, I also happen to know, or who has Darnold, is a Bills fan. So maybe I could even get like a first and a second. So maybe I'll try that. With Darnold, I agree with a lot of what you guys said. I know a lot of people like to make fun of him because of the whole seeing ghosts incident, and he got sick, which, by the way, you shouldn't really make fun of a player when they get sick. I know, like, it's kind of funny because he had, like, the quote-unquote kissing disease, but, like, dude was, like, seriously ill. So, like, maybe lay off him a little bit. And then he came back and he could take some hits. And as these guys mentioned, he did really well in the second half of the season, at least for fantasy purposes. So he's certainly an interesting guy. And my concern, I guess, is that he doesn't outlast Gase. And what I mean by that is another coach comes in, he's at the end of his rookie contract, and they go, I want my guy. I don't want a guy from the previous regime. However, since I'm also talking about Josh Allen, my concern with Josh Allen, and this is coming from someone who used to love Blake Bortles and hype up Blake Bortles repeatedly, is basically that Josh Allen is the new Blake Bortles. In that he gets a lot of fantasy points, but his job is not secure because, he'll have QB1 finishes off like garbage time or rushing touchdowns or whatever it is. But that the Bills eventually go, we can't really tolerate a guy who completes under 60% of his passes continually. So I really don't know where I fall in that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, one thing with Darnold was he got pressured more than any other quarterback last year, so and it, they invested in the offensive line, so hopefully that helps too. And I mean, I think there's upside there. I think is really what it comes down to. And we see how he did last year over his 12 or so weeks. I mean, I think overall, with the exception of that terrible New England game, I mean, he did pretty well on the season. And, if that offensive line gets better and if, Perriman and Mims, can be an upgrade to that receiving group along with Herndon coming back, I feel like, that 20 to 24 that I mentioned could, creep up a little bit higher into the teens with just.
I'm going to try to trade for Darnold for this year, maybe be successful. By the way, this league has existed for 3 seasons. This is a not so humble brag. I've made the championship game all 3 seasons. When I don't make the 4th, it'll directly be both of your fault. Just so you know.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I can live with that. I'll sleep at night.
I'm sure the rest of the league will be fine with that as well. They're probably tired of hearing about it. We are going to transition, though. We're going to transition into George's favorite non-domestic animal. And I recently learned that he also has some stuff set up in his home to feed these animals. So, George, tell us why hummingbirds are your favorite non-domestic animal.
So, my wife likes to tease me because I get so excited, like in May and June when hummingbirds start kind of, migrating into our area of the country. So, I love them. They're adorable. They remind me of my dog because I have a tiny little, miniature dachshund. So it's basically the miniature dachshund of the animal world, or well, I guess the bird world, not the animal world. My dog is also an animal. But yeah, I like watching them. They're really cool. The way they move. And yes, I do have a hummingbird feeder at my house, and I make my sugar water and put it out for them. And I get so excited because it's right outside my front window. I'm I'm 36, but I'm basically at least twice my age based on, this whole series of events that happens with hummingbirds.
And Matt, do you have some fun facts about hummingbirds to share?
Well, my first question is for George about your hummingbird recipe. What's your sugar water recipe? Because there are some do's and don'ts with it. So I need to make sure you're feeding these guys correctly.
I think if I remember correctly, it's a 4-to-1 ratio that I use, and then it's dissolving it and mixing it up, letting it cool before I take it out. But yeah, pretty simple on my end.
No, you're only using white sugar, right? No,
only white sugar. No. I keep that. I keep that for my various baking that I do.
Right, and keep for those of you that have hummingbird feeders too. You can buy that pre-made stuff. Don't get the stuff with the red food coloring in it. The reason why they do that is hummingbirds are actually like almost like completely, like they basically can't smell anything. So there is some scientific theory that they are attracted to like red and orange flowers. That's why they put that stuff in the pre-made stuff, but don't put red food coloring in your hummingbird stuff because it's not good for them. It can make them sick.
You just buy a red feeder. That's what you do. You buy the red feeder and you got your bases covered.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. They're when George picked hummingbirds, like I was like both surprised and not surprised. I don't know why. It just seemed like that if somebody was going to pick hummingbird as their favorite animal, it would be George. I don't know why I thought that. It just seems like perfect for you, George. But I did look up some facts because I am definitely not a hummingbird expert. One thing I found is that they are the smallest migrating bird. Like George mentioned, they do migrate. They don't fly in flocks though, like other birds do. They'll travel alone for about 500 miles at a time. Occasionally, they're also the only birds that can fly backwards. And if you didn't know why hummingbirds are called hummingbirds, it's because of the sound their wings make, because they kind of make a little bit of hum. Very small bird. The weight is less than a nickel. They weigh less than a nickel if you were to pick them up. So yeah, there's some hummingbird facts for you. There are a number of them that are endangered, and if you are looking to, if you too have a passion for hummingbirds like George, one place you can donate to is the ABC, the American Bird Conservancy, abcbirds.org. They do work with a ton of different birds, but you can donate specifically to hummingbirds if you were so inclined.
Make sure you check that out if you have the means to spare and you also are a fan of hummingbirds. I have to say, hummingbirds just gained a lot of respect from me because I used to practice walking backwards to give like college tours, and I would trip over myself repeatedly, and yet these guys are flying backwards. That's crazy. That is impressive. So hummingbirds, I never really thought. I mean, I can't say that I like actively thought about hummingbirds before, but now if I see one,
they are. I think of them as the Tariq Cohen of the bird world. You know,
yeah,
they're jitterbugs that go all over the place. You know,
the birds using the animal comp. We didn't even ask him for the animal comp for a player, but he snuck one in.
Yeah, he's the bird. The bird. What is he? Tariq Cohen's the human joystick, so they're the bird joysticks.
Right.
Doesn't have quite the same ring to it.
Yeah, no. The aviary joystick. I don't know if that's
I don't know. I'm going with that.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Well, a second ago, Matt mentioned that some hummingbirds are going extinct. George, on this segment, what we like to do is talk about things or even people or just general whatever that you would like to go extinct rather than an animal that's going extinct. So the example I always give, because this used to annoy me, although I no longer am going to be living in New York City, is slow walkers and people who just take up like the entire sidewalk. I wish that habit would go extinct because it just drives me crazy. But it literally can be anything. If you don't have one, Matt and I are happy to go first. I'm not even sure that I have one this week. I didn't get particularly annoyed this week, which is both a good thing and a bad thing for when you're recording this show. But Matt, if you have one, feel free to jump in.
I got one, and maybe it was mentioned in the last couple of shows. I don't know, but I'm going back to it if it was, and that's people that aren't wearing masks or face coverings. Like, come on, guys! It's not hard to wear a face covering over yourself when you are crossing another human being. Where people are starting to see people get bored and numb to the fact that no big deal. We're only 1,000 people a day are dying from this. We're seeing states all over the place spike new levels. Florida is over 2,000 cases a day. Arizona is over 1,500 cases a day. Texas over 2,400 new cases a day. Like this is not over, and it just seems like people are pretending that it is over. So. Wear your mask, and if you don't wear your mask, then you can go extinct. Presumably of coronavirus is what you would go extinct of. But no more not wearing the mask. Put the mask on.
Yeah, I'm certainly with Matt on that. And I'm going to jump in here. And mine is now, I just remembered what mine's going to be. And it's oddly specific, and it's very lighthearted compared to what Matt just did, even though I full-heartedly agree with what Matt just said. And it's this. This is also something that carried over from New York City in a way. It's a general, like, if a dog doesn't like something that you're doing near it, stop doing that thing. But the specific thing is I've been living with my parents during the pandemic, and they have a nice backyard for the dogs to run around in, but it backs out to the street. And what people will do is they'll just walk by, and like my dog doesn't really like other people, so he will start barking. The other dogs will start barking. Some people have taken to barking back at them, or even stopping right in front of the fence and going like, "Oh, look at the cute dogs." And like, I don't want to be rude, especially because I'm trying to learn how to be like a good neighbor, I guess. But at the same time, I'm really tempted to just say like, "Get the F out of here. Like, keep moving," because I don't want these dogs continually barking in my ear. And also, they're on high alert. You're not doing anything nice to them. It just frustrates me when people don't understand. Like, no, if you just stand there when a dog is barking at you, you should probably just leave.
Just go away.
Yeah, exactly. So that is my extinction of the week.
Okay, I have two. I have a
Nice.
lot, but I'm gonna narrow it down to two. So one that I have is, I bought a new house about 3 months ago. Bobby, you mentioned that you guys bought a new house.
That was a secret, but that's fine.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
Beep.
No. So I will just say quickly, the reason I didn't say anything publicly, and it's fine if the people who listen to the show know, is it just feels like an insanely weird time to be like, hey, so there's all this stuff going on, but I just had something like good happen to me.
No, this is positivity here. It's
just says it on
extinction
the star
/
sheet,
positivity. Yeah, this is the positivity part. Now I'm going to get to the extinction part. So it's people who don't take care of their home is something that I have a big problem with. Like, they let their grass die. They don't, they don't paint their front porch or any of that stuff. I find that quite annoying. And like my wife and I love to garden and make our lawn nice and do all these things. And the worst is like looking next door and you're like, oh, this guy hasn't mowed in 2 months and it just looks like a jungle over there. So I may not want to have them go extinct per se, but they can move away. That's totally fine with me. So that's one. And then your dog one gave me another one. We're a couple weeks away from July 4th. So the people who can definitely go extinct are the ones who shoot off fireworks on the 4th, because my dog is not necessarily afraid of them. He actually doesn't care. He's kind of a jerk anyway. But I know a lot of dogs are afraid of it. Kids are afraid of fireworks too, in a lot of cases, very little ones especially. So yeah, I hate people who shoot off fireworks, especially like in urban areas and like in areas that are, around a lot of houses and stuff. I think that's just dangerous. And, if you're going to go watch fireworks, go somewhere and go watch them, and don't shoot them off in your backyard and potentially hurt somebody or scare, the dogs in your neighborhood. I think that's
and also we don't need to celebrate America this year. We could just mail it in for 2020. Let's try to do better next year, and we'll pick it up in 2021. You guys.
July 4th is also my birthday, so if you want to not celebrate America this year, you can just say the fireworks are for me, which I grew up believing, by the way.
There's plenty of other things you can do. You can grill out. We all like to cook out and stuff, and you can play in the backyard and all these other things. Like, the fireworks aren't necessary.
And you guys got super nice 4K TVs. Watch some fireworks on TV. It's just as good. You got a nice 70-inch TV
for Christmas.
To George's point about the people who don't take care of their house. So when we were looking for houses, and we looked a lot around my parents' neighborhood just because it'd be convenient to live near them, they were showing us this house that the vines had basically grown over. No one had taken care of the yard in years. There were broken windows and whatever. But it was a really nice old looking house from the early 1900s. And my mom's like, oh, you know what? We should wait to see when there's a foreclosure on this. And then maybe you guys could live there and get this great house and fix it up. And all I could think to myself is this is 100% the house on the block that every little kid story begins with that house is haunted AF, or some creepy stuff happens in that house, or even maybe Boo Radley, which is a little less scary, lives there. But it definitely and we began this before we jumped on. I was talking to these guys about how jumpy I am. So living in a house that is definitely 100% haunted is really not for me.
Old man Bobby's never going to give us back our Frisbee.
Man, That is the one benefit that I'd have of living there is I guess no one would want to stop in front of my dog.
Yeah, there you go. See, they won't bother your dog. So yeah, you gotta weigh the options.
Yeah. So then what we do on the flip side, which George already alluded to, just especially in these times, is if you have anything positive to say, it can be a personal note, a larger scale note. I guess mine this week will be that I am soon moving into a house, which is nice. I'm very happy about it. It just maybe was a little bit earlier than I anticipated, but I have been over the city for a few years, so it's nice to be moving somewhere hopefully quieter. And yeah, good stuff. You guys have anything positive you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do. Let's say, well, first off, congratulations, Bobby. It's awesome. I don't think you need to feel, like unexcited about it. It's a very good thing. And, we literally closed on our house the day that the lockdown in our state started. So it was quite weird for us as well.
Well, congrats to you too. It was more of like a posting on social media thing, where it's all like Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, and like, hey, look at me.
New house. Yeah. No, it's an exciting time. So that's great. The positivity I'll share. So I work for 7th Generation, the cleaning, they make all the green cleaning supplies and everything. And, I've worked at a lot of different places over the years. So my positive thing is, I really enjoy all the giving they do to the community. So they donated pallets of disinfectant to the food bank in our area. They donated $250,000 and a bunch of cleaning supplies to the Navajo Nation because Native Americans were getting disproportionately affected by COVID-19. They gave money to the bailout fund related to Black Lives Matter. They've done a ton of great things. So, my positivity thing is, working for a company that really reaches out to different parts of the community and really is giving and willing to, kind of share and not just be kind of the, what you think of with every company and maximizing sales. They really do have a big component of giving and have a whole social board that's just focused on that. So I think it's pretty awesome. And I'm really lucky to work at a place like that. And to see that every day is super, super exciting for me.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Matt, do you have anything to share?
Not specifically, but I'll say, hey, it's SFB time, you guys. The invites are almost all the way out. We found out divisions today. That's exciting, and I've been helping
still don't
John.
have a division yet, by the way.
Well,
just putting it out there.
Well, too bad. That sucks for you, Bobby. I'm actually I'm in a terrible division for me making it out of it. Like I'm in the Voltron division, and it's like a freaking murderer's row of people in this division. But anyway, I was going to say that. And then John has also been working real hard on getting these eliminators set up. Something like $12,000 last year. Maybe even I'm probably undercutting him a little bit of how much they raised last year for Fantasy Cares. And we're almost done with that. I've been helping him set up DMs and leagues and stuff like that. So I think I have like 7 more chats to set up, and then we're almost done, you guys. So it's exciting to be done with that process and getting into SFB season here pretty soon here in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, and if anyone wants to donate, fantasycares.net.
Yes, please.
Yeah, you can also donate to the SFB Podathon. And this year, Scott has given a particular focus on donating to a charity of your choice as well. So find something you care about and donate because it's all for a good cause.
Don't forget about the hummingbirds.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't have a hummingbird team in this red list, but maybe next time.
Red list 4 will be all
red list 4, all hummingbirds, all like 17 different kinds of hummingbirds.
Yes. I think 5. It's just going to be super redundant.
Well, with that, we are going to start winding down for the night. George, I wanted to thank you again for joining us. This was awesome, very insightful stuff. And it's particularly about hummingbirds. I mean, you had a lot of good things to say about quarterbacks, but the hummingbird knowledge may outweigh that.
The hummingbird is the 101 of the animal world.
And
sorry,
Matt.
You can. What do you? Sorry, I missed the question.
I was going to say
I said the hummingbird is the 101 of the animal world, and sorry about that, Matt.
Well, Well, I will say if I had to choose between the hummingbird and the panda, sorry, J Mike, hummingbird is going to be the 101 of those two. So
J Mike just can't catch a break on this podcast. Well, again, George, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate learning about hummingbirds. And Matt, let everyone know where they can find what's going on with you. And then George, let everyone know where they can find what's going on with you, and we'll wrap it up.
Same place as always, dynastyleaguefootball.com. Listen to the podcast, read all the stuff. That's about it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Here, I'll help you out, Matt. The Dynasty League Football podcast, definitely check it out. It's great. If you haven't listened to the Cash, Stash, or Trash episodes, I highly recommend, with rookies by division. I've been catching up on those.
Nice.
And you can find me on Twitter at RotoHack. I write for 4for4 Football. I do a lot of the Dynasty content over there, as well as some redraft stuff as well, and Dynasty rankings you can find there also. So you can look at my next update, which should include some Zooperflex rankings, and you can come back to this episode and realize that probably some things have changed.
And I just want to add, I don't always do this, but when I first started Dynasty, and George had no idea I was going to do this, when I first started playing Dynasty, George was one of the first people that I really started following and paying attention to what they were saying. So if you're not already following him, I don't know what you're doing. Matt was actually another one of those people. So you should be following both those guys. And I feel incredibly lucky to be able to podcast with them and call them my friends. And with that, I guess I added another positivity to the positivity note. But we're going to wrap up. As always, you can find us at Zooperflex. Again, I don't know why we do this at the end of the show. If you're listening to us, you know where to find us, but I do it out of habit and because other podcasts do it. You can find me at Rek Fantasy. That's RKED Fantasy. And my work is exclusively on Dynasty League Football. Until next time, keep it classy, Fantasy Twitter, and stay real. I don't know why I felt the need to add something there. Russ, you can edit out.
Stay safe. Yeah, stay safe.
Stay safe.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Feed the hummingbirds.
Yeah.